Penelope Garner clutched her shaking hands together as the sheriff stared her down with eyes cold as Montana winters, his disbelief hanging in the air of the dusty jailhouse like gun smoke. The year was 1873, and in the frontier town of Redemption Creek, a woman's word carried little weight against a man of means, especially when that man was Thaddeus Blackwell, the wealthiest cattle baron in the territory. "Miss Garner, you expect me to believe that Blackwell's men rustled your father's cattle and then burned your barn to cover their tracks? Without a single witness?" Sheriff Walton leaned back in his creaking chair, thumbs hooked in his vest pockets. "That's a mighty serious accusation against a respected businessman." "I saw his brand on their saddles," Penelope insisted, her voice steadier than she felt. At 22, she'd been running her father's modest ranch alone since his passing last winter, fighting to keep what was rightfully hers in a world that believed women belonged in kitchens, not on horseback. "And their foreman, Clayton, he threatened me last week at the general store when I refused to sell our water rights." The sheriff sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. "Miss Garner, we've been through this before. Your imagination's getting the better of you. Women often find ranch life overwhelming." The jailhouse door swung open with a bang, sending dust motes swirling in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the doorway. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the brightness, broad-shouldered and trail-worn. "I believe her," came a deep voice, rich as coffee and twice as strong. The man stepped inside, removing his hat to reveal sun-bronzed features and eyes the color of sage. "And I've got the proof you need, Sheriff." Penelope stared at the stranger, heart hammering against her ribs. She'd never seen him before, yet here he was, standing in her defense when the whole town had turned a deaf ear. "Owen Zimmerman." He introduced himself with a slight nod in her direction before fixing the sheriff with a hard stare. "And I just rode in from the North Ridge where I saw 3 of Blackwell's men driving cattle that don't bear his brand." The sheriff's chair creaked as he straightened. "And how would you know which cattle belong to whom, Mr. Zimmerman? You're new to these parts. 15 years working cattle from Texas to Montana teaches a man to recognize when something's not right." Owen approached the desk, laying down a scorched piece of leather. "Found this near Miss Garner's burned-out barn. It's a piece of a saddlebag with Blackwell's mark, partially burned off. Not something an innocent man leaves behind." Penelope stood transfixed. Who was this man who'd appeared like an answer to prayers she hadn't dared to utter? Sheriff Walton examined the leather scrap with reluctance. "This isn't conclusive. There's more," Owen interrupted. "I tracked those men to Blackwell's north pasture. They've got the cattle penned in a hidden box canyon, planning to rebrand them tonight. If you ride out with me now, you can catch them red-handed." The sheriff's face hardened. "Mr. Zimmerman, I don't take kindly to strangers riding into my town and telling me how to do my job. And I don't take kindly to lawmen who ignore justice because they're in a rich man's pocket," Owen replied, his tone dangerously soft. The tension in the room pulled taut as a fiddle string. Penelope watched the standoff, her breath caught in her throat. "That's a serious accusation," Walton finally said, rising slowly from his chair. "No more serious than calling a lady a liar when she's only asking for the protection the law's supposed to provide," Owen countered. The sheriff's face flushed deep crimson. "Get out of my office, both of you. Miss Garner, I've heard enough of your tales. And you, stranger, best keep riding through Redemption Creek if you know what's good for you." Owen didn't move. "Sheriff, you have a choice. Ride with me to that canyon, or I'll bring those cattle thieves to justice myself. Are you threatening to take the law into your own hands? I'm promising that justice will be served, with or without your badge behind it." The silence stretched between them like a drawn gun. Penelope found her voice. "Sheriff, please. My father built that ranch from nothing. If I lose any more cattle, I won't survive the winter." Walton's gaze flickered between them, calculation working behind his eyes. Finally, he snatched his hat from the rack. Fine. I'll give you 1 hour of my time, Zimmerman. But if this is a wild goose chase, you'll be spending the night in my jail for wasting my time. Outside, Penelope hurried to keep pace with Owen's long strides. Mr. Zimmerman, she called. I don't know how to thank you. He slowed, turning to face her. The late afternoon sun caught in his light brown hair, revealing threads of gold. No need for thanks, Miss Garner. I've seen Blackwell's type before. Men who think their money puts them above the law. But why help me? You don't even know me. Something flickered in those sage green eyes. Let's just say I recognize injustice when I see it. He glanced at the sheriff, who was checking his rifle by the hitching post. You riding with us? It's my cattle they stole, she replied, lifting her chin. I'll be there when they're recovered. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I figured you might say that. Your horse ready. Within 15 minutes, the three of them were riding out of town, Penelope on her chestnut mare, flanked by Owen and a visibly disgruntled Sheriff Walton. The sheriff kept shooting suspicious glances at Owen, whose eyes constantly scanned the horizon, alert to any movement. How did you find those cattle? Penelope asked as they rode. The North Ridge is miles from the main trail. I wasn't on the main trail, Owen replied. Been scouting this territory for a few weeks, looking for grazing land. Happened to be in the right place at the wrong time for Blackwell's men. Looking to settle here? She asked, curiosity piqued. Maybe, if the welcome improves. He cast a pointed look at the sheriff's back. They rode in silence after that, following Owen's lead as he guided them along a narrow deer path that wound through stands of ponderosa pine. The scent of resin hung heavy in the cooling air as the sun began its descent behind the jagged mountains to the west. After an hour's ride, Owen raised his hand, signaling them to stop. He dismounted silently and gestured for them to do the same. The canyon's just beyond that rise, he whispered as they gathered close. Last I saw, there were 3 men. They've got about 20 head of cattle penned in the back of the canyon with a makeshift fence. Sheriff Walton frowned. If this is some kind of trick. It's not, Penelope interrupted, recognizing the distant lowing of cattle. I can hear them. They crept forward on foot, keeping low in the tall grass until they reached the ridge. Below them, a narrow canyon opened up, its entrance barely visible from the main trail. Inside, just as Owen had said, a small herd of cattle milled around a crude pen. 3 men worked around a blazing fire, heating branding irons. Penelope gasped softly. Those are my father's cattle. I'd know that roan bull anywhere. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted the men. And that's Clayton, Blackwell's foreman. The sheriff's expression darkened as he took in the scene. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Looks like you might have been telling the truth after all, Miss Garner. Mighty generous of you to admit it, Owen said dryly. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Walton straightened his shoulders. My job. He checked his pistol. We'll go down together. Keep your weapons ready, but let me do the talking. They descended into the canyon, the element of surprise on their side until one of the rustlers spotted them and shouted a warning. Clayton and his men went for their guns, but froze when they saw the sheriff's badge catching the firelight. Evening, gentlemen, Walton called out, his hand resting on his holster. Mind explaining what you're doing with Miss Garner's cattle? Clayton, a wiry man with a face like tanned leather, recovered quickly. These ain't Garner cattle, Sheriff. Found 'em wandering loose up north. Figured they was strays. Strange coincidence, Owen remarked, that these strays all bear the Garner brand, and you just happen to have fresh branding irons heating up. Clayton's eyes narrowed dangerously. Who's the stranger, Sheriff? Someone who caught you red-handed, Walton replied, his voice harder than Penelope had ever heard it. Perhaps he wasn't completely in Blackwell's pocket after all. Drop your weapons, boys. You're under arrest for cattle rustling. For a moment, tension crackled in the air like the nearby campfire. Then Clayton made his decision. Take M, he shouted, drawing his pistol in one fluid motion. Gunshots exploded through the canyon. Penelope dove behind a boulder as bullets ricocheted off stone. She heard Owen shout for her to stay down, followed by more gunfire. Heart pounding, she peered around the edge of her shelter to see the sheriff exchanging shots with one of the rustlers while another circled behind him. Sheriff, behind you, she called out. The warning came just in time. Walton spun and fired, catching the man in the shoulder. He went down with a cry. Owen was locked in a desperate struggle with Clayton, their figures grappling in the dust and firelight. The foreman was smaller but wiry and vicious, landing several hard blows before Owen managed to break free and deliver a powerful right hook that sent Clayton sprawling. When the dust settled, all three rustlers lay subdued, 2 wounded and Clayton unconscious from Owen's final punch. The sheriff, breathing hard, began binding their wrists with rope from his saddlebag. You all right, Miss Garner? Owen called, wiping blood from a split lip. Penelope emerged from her shelter, legs shaking but head high. I'm fine, better than fine. She surveyed the captured rustlers with grim satisfaction. Will Blackwell finally face justice for this, Sheriff? Walton secured the last knot. These men will. As for Blackwell, that depends on whether they talk. He glanced at Owen. I owe you an apology, Zimmerman. And you too, Miss Garner. I should have listened sooner. Yes, you should have, she agreed. But there was no triumph in her voice, only weariness. What happens now? I take these men back to town, lock them up. The sheriff straightened. You two get these cattle back to your ranch. I'll come by tomorrow to take your statements properly. As the sheriff prepared to leave with his prisoners, Owen approached Penelope. In the fading light, she could see a bruise forming along his jawline where Clayton had struck him. You're hurt, she said, reaching up without thinking to touch the darkening mark. He caught her hand gently, a current passing between them that had nothing to do with the evening's violence. It's nothing. I've had worse from ornery steers. Their eyes held for a long moment before she reluctantly withdrew her hand. Mr. Zimmerman, Owen, he corrected. Owen, she repeated, his name feeling right on her lips. I still don't understand why you helped me. He looked away, his gaze settling on the cattle that were now calmly grazing nearby. 3 years ago, I lost my small spread in Colorado to men like Blackwell. Men who think money and power give them the right to take whatever they want. His voice roughened. By the time I got the law involved, it was too late. The land was gone. I swore I'd never stand by and watch it happen to someone else. Understanding dawned in her eyes. So you've been, what, traveling the frontier looking for wrongs to right? A wry smile touched his lips. Something like that. Though I admit, I usually don't find myself in gunfights within hours of reaching a new town. Redemption Creek offers a special welcome, she replied, matching his tone. Then, more seriously, what will you do now? He considered the question. Still looking for a place to settle. Heard there might be land for sale near here. There is, she said, her pulse quickening. Mine. His eyebrows rose. You're selling your ranch? After fighting so hard to keep it. Not all of it, but I've been thinking. It's too much for one person. My father always talked about parceling off the north section. She hesitated. It has good water and grazing. Perfect for someone looking to start fresh. Something kindled in his eyes. Are you offering me land, Miss Garner? Penelope, she corrected, echoing his earlier response. And yes, I suppose I am. Consider it payment for your help. I didn't help you expecting payment. I know. That's why I'm offering. She smiled then, the first real smile since he'd met her. Besides, I could use a neighbor I can trust. As night fell completely, they rounded up the cattle and began the slow journey back to the Garner ranch. The stars emerged one by one, blanketing the vast Montana sky with their silver light. They rode side by side, occasionally exchanging glances that held more than casual interest. By the time they reached her ranch, a bond had formed between them, forged in danger and strengthened by shared purpose. As they released the cattle into her corral, Penelope knew with certainty that Owen Zimmerman's arrival in Redemption Creek had changed the course of her life. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Penelope awoke early, her body aching from the previous day's tension, but her mind clearer than it had been in months. She dressed quickly and went to prepare breakfast, knowing Owen would be hungry after spending the night in her barn. Despite her offering him the spare room, she found him already up, repairing a section of her corral fence that had been sagging for weeks. "You don't have to do that," she called as she approached, 2 steaming cups of coffee in her hands. He straightened, pushing back his hat to reveal eyes crinkled at the corners from years of squinting into the sun. "Figured I'd make myself useful." "You've done enough already," she said, offering him one of the cups. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and neither pulled away immediately. "Sheriff's coming up the road," Owen noted, nodding toward a dust cloud in the distance. Walton arrived looking haggard, as if he'd had little sleep. He accepted Penelope's offer of coffee with a grateful nod. "Clayton talked," he announced without preamble. "Turned on Blackwell faster than a rattlesnake strikes. Said Blackwell's been planning to drive you out for months. Miss Garner. Wants to dam up Willow Creek, and your water rights were in the way." "I knew it," Penelope said, a cold satisfaction settling in her chest. "Will you arrest him?" The sheriff grimaced. "Already did. First light this morning. Town's in an uproar. Never seen a man fall from grace so fast. His other ranch hands are coming forward now, telling tales of other dirty dealings." "Good," Owen said simply. Sheriff Walton fixed him with a curious stare. "You planning to stay around these parts, Zimmerman?" Owen glanced at Penelope before answering. "Thinking about it. Miss Garner mentioned some land for sale." "Did she now?" The sheriff's gaze moved between them, something knowing in his weathered face. "Well, Redemption Creek could use more men like you. God knows we've had enough of the other kind." He set down his empty cup. "I'll need both your statements, then I'll be out of your hair." After the sheriff departed, a comfortable silence settled between them. Penelope found herself studying Owen's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the quiet competence in his hands as he resumed work on the fence. "Did you mean it?" she asked suddenly. "About staying?" He paused, hammer in mid-swing. "I meant it. Question is, did you mean it about the land?" "I did." She stepped closer. "But there's something I should tell you first. Running this ranch alone hasn't been easy. There's a reason Blackwell thought he could drive me out." She took a deep breath. "The bank's been threatening foreclosure. The north section is the only part that's fully paid for. The rest, I'm 3 months behind on payments." Instead of disappointment or judgment, understanding filled his eyes. "That explains why you need to sell." "I've tried everything," she admitted. "Took in laundry from town, sold my mother's silver. But after the cattle rustling and the barn burning." She gestured helplessly. Owen was quiet for a long moment, his gaze traveling over the ranch, the weathered but solid house, the corrals, the rolling pastures stretching toward the distant mountains. When he looked back at her, there was resolve in his expression. "I have another idea," he said. A partnership. Partnership. I've got savings. Enough to pay off your bank loan and rebuild your barn. In return, we work the ranch together. Split the profits. Build something that can't be taken away from either of us. Her heart stuttered. You'd do that? Invest in a struggling ranch run by a woman you barely know. I know enough, he said softly. I know you've got more courage than most men I've met. I know you love this land enough to fight for it. His voice dropped lower. And I know that from the moment I saw you standing up to that sheriff, I wanted to know you better. Heat bloomed in Penelope's cheeks. A business partnership, she clarified, needing to be certain. A smile tugged at his lips. To start with, though I hope. He set down his hammer, taking a step toward her. I hope we might explore other possibilities in time. The weeks that followed brought rapid changes to the Garner Ranch, now the Garner and Zimmerman Ranch, according to the new deed filed at the county office. Owen's investment paid off the bank loan with enough left to rebuild the barn and purchase additional cattle to replace those lost to Blackwell's schemes. Word spread through the territory about Blackwell's arrest. As more victims came forward, the cattle baron's empire crumbled. He was sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison. His vast holdings auctioned to pay restitution to those he'd wronged. For Penelope, each day brought new revelations about her business partner. She learned that Owen had been a cavalry scout during the war before turning to ranching, that he could read Shakespeare by firelight and whittle delicate wooden figures with the same hands that could break a wild horse, that his laugh, rare at first but increasingly frequent, made something warm unfurl inside her chest. They worked side by side from dawn to dusk, rebuilding what had been damaged, expanding what was working. Their partnership flourished as summer ripened into fall, the ranch prospering under their combined efforts. One evening in early October, as the aspen leaves turned to gold against the darkening mountains, Penelope found Owen on the porch, staring thoughtfully into the sunset. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, settling beside him on the bench he'd crafted. "Just thinking about choices," he replied, his shoulder warm against hers. "How the smallest decision can change everything. Like riding into a town you'd never heard of and defending a woman you'd never met?" He smiled, the expression transforming his face. "Exactly like that." He turned toward her, his eyes serious now. "Penelope, there's something I need to say." Her pulse quickened. Over the past months, their relationship had evolved, each day bringing them closer, though neither had put words to the feelings growing between them. "What is it?" "Our partnership has been good, better than good." He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "But I find myself wanting more." "More land?" she asked, though she knew that wasn't what he meant. He chuckled softly. "No. More of this." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent shivers racing up her arm. "More of us. Owen." Her voice caught as she met his gaze. "I'm falling in love with you, Penelope Garner," he said simply. "Actually, I think I started falling that first day in the sheriff's office when you refused to back down, even though the whole world was against you." Joy bubbled up inside her, bright and effervescent. "I've been falling too," she confessed. "I just wasn't sure you felt the same." "I do." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "And I'm hoping you'll consider one more partnership between us. A permanent one." Her heart soared. "Are you proposing, Mr. Zimmerman?" "Inelegantly, but yes." His eyes never left hers. "I love you, Penelope, and I want to build a life with you, not just a ranch." She didn't hesitate. "Yes," she whispered, leaning forward to close the distance between them. "Yes to all of it." Their first kiss was gentle, a promise exchanged in the golden light of sunset. When they drew apart, both were smiling, the future stretching before them as vast and full of possibility as the Montana sky. They married that November, a simple ceremony in the newly rebuilt barn, decorated with late autumn wildflowers and pine boughs. Sheriff Walton stood as Owen's best man, a friendship having grown between the two men in the months since their confrontation in the jailhouse. Redemption Creek turned out in force. The same townspeople who had once looked askance at Penelope's solitary struggle now raising glasses to the couple's happiness. She wore her mother's wedding dress, restyled by the dressmaker in town, and carried a bouquet of sage and prairie grass tied with ribbon. Through the winter, they settled into married life, finding joy in simple moments, reading by the fire on snowy evenings, planning spring planting over breakfast, falling asleep and waking in each other's arms. The ranch flourished under their joint stewardship, their different strengths creating something stronger than either could have built alone. Spring brought new calves, fresh green grass, and unexpected news. As wildflowers carpeted the meadows, Penelope discovered she was expecting their first child, due when the aspen leaves would turn gold again. "A family?" Owen murmured one evening, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of rose and amber. "Something I never thought I'd have." "Nor I," she admitted. "After my father died, I thought I'd always be alone, fighting to keep what was mine without anyone to stand beside me." She turned to meet his gaze. "I never imagined someone would ride into town and say those simple words that changed everything." "I believe you," he quoted softly. "3 words that gave me hope when I had none left." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "And then you gave me 3 more that gave me a future." "I love you," he completed, drawing her closer. "And I love you," she whispered back, her voice carrying the absolute certainty that had grown with each passing day. As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, watching the first stars appear in the vast Montana sky. Their ranch sprawled before them, cattle grazing peacefully in moonlit pastures, the land that had almost been lost now thriving under their care. In the years that followed, the Zimmerman Garner Ranch became one of the most prosperous in the territory. Their first child, a daughter with her father's sage green eyes and her mother's determination, was followed by a son 2 years later. The children grew strong and free on the ranch, learning to ride almost before they could walk, absorbing their parents' values of justice, hard work, and unwavering loyalty. The legend of how they met became a favorite bedtime story, the tale of a brave woman who stood alone against corruption, and the stranger who believed her when no one else would. A simple act of faith that blossomed into love as enduring as the mountains that watched over their home. And though Redemption Creek grew and changed with the passing years, one truth remained constant: that sometimes justice and love arrive in the same moment, in the form of a dust-covered stranger with the courage to speak truth when it matters most.